Excellence by ExxonMobil, Petronas and Shell.
Hello, you are tuning in to the 8th Merdeka Award Roundtable. I am your host, Cynthia. The Merdeka Award is founded by Petronas, Shell and ExxonMobil with the aim to recognize and reward outstanding individuals who have made contributions to the betterment of Malaysia. And at this roundtable, we discuss issues that are pertinent to the development and future of the country. This time around, I'm joined by 5 inspiring, successful, and very young individuals to talk about our topic: how will the next generation of Malaysians shape the nation? Without further ado, let's meet our panelists. On my far right, we have Dzameer Dzulkifli, the co-founder and managing director of Teach for Malaysia, a non-profit organization that is doing a great job in tackling education inequality in Malaysia, especially in high-need schools in the country. Next to him, we have Christopher Tock, co-founder and executive director of social enterprise called I, or known as Empowering Youth Endeavours, aimed at reducing youth unemployment in Malaysia. And I also have, joining me, is Suhaili Micheline, an award-winning and internationally acclaimed dancer. And I understand, Suhaili, you teach in many dance schools in Malaysia.
Yes, I do.
What are some of the places that you teach?
The renowned University for Performing Arts, Aswara. Also, in between semesters, I teach in Sunway and also KDU. And of course, Aurora School of Dance and Infinity, led by Tiara Jacquelina.
All right, that's a lot on your plate.
Yes.
Okay, thanks for coming to the show. Next, I have Suzanne Lee, a documentary photographer and filmmaker, and her assignments, I believe, has brought her to many places, exotic places around the world, and her work also has been featured in print and multimedia exhibitions internationally. Thanks for joining us, Suzanne.
Thank you very much for having
Last but not least, we have Dr. Kamalan Jeevaratnam, Head of Physiology at the Perdana University Royal College of Surgeons Island in Malaysia. Dr. Kamalan is also the recipient of the Merdeka Award Grant for International Attachment 2014. Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right, thank you guys for joining us. Let's get right into it. I'd like to start maybe with Chris first, because I know in your work you engage a lot with young people, and I'd like to know, what do they have to say? What do you think are some of the biggest challenges that young Malaysians face today?
Well, I see, yes, it's true that I engage a lot of them, and especially on social media, as 24/7 on social media. So from what I hear, they change. I mean, what they want from 3 years back and 2 years back and even this year, it changes so fast. I mean, with the coming of technology, I don't blame this. But at the same time, you get a little bit worried. You know, I mean, at one point you say, I think I know what they want, and you give them what they want, and they say, no, that's not actually what I want, because of this fast-paced change. But I think as of today, the whole, you know, I need to be listened to has gone because of social media, and now it's all about what do I get? What do I get? You know, as a youth, as a young person in Malaysia, what is it that say the government or the private sector or the public sector can offer me that makes me want to stay? You know, because opportunities are everywhere now, isn't it? So yeah, I guess the biggest challenge you would say is things that make them feel comfortable. A house, for example, or a job, or a career that they want to stay on for the rest of their lives. So these are
I believe you mentioned engagement in cost of living.
Yes,
these are the things
yes,
that concern
correct.
young Malaysians. Okay, we'll get more into that later, but I'd like to go to Dzameer.
No, I was just wondering, it sounded like a sense of entitlement, though, to a certain degree.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I guess so, yeah. I mean, just about what Dzameer mentioned, because of what they see on social media, and especially now they can compare. I mean, back then, there's no such thing as comparison, right? So when they see some people getting things, sometimes they don't feel they don't have that want of wanting to do it, get through the process to get there. They just want a shortcut. So this sense of entitlement is also an issue that I think we know that they will face.
Dzameer, challenges that you face as a young Malaysian?
I think as part of Teach Malaysia, the one challenge that we always want to solve is that the opportunities or a child's background often determine his or her outcome in life. And that's why Teach Malaysia recruits graduates or young professionals to teach for 2 years in underprivileged schools. So for me, I always, like, there's going to be a lot of challenges out there, But my personality just zooms it down to just this one challenge, and if we tackle that one challenge, hopefully all the other pieces will come into play, would be solved in the long run. So education always is the key, and that's why I'm putting my efforts and energy in there, in that sense.
Okay, we'll get more into education later on this show. Maybe Suhaili, do you, as a young dancer working in Malaysia and also teaching here, what are some of the challenges that you face, and maybe also from your students, what are they telling you, especially in the arts scene?
As what Chris and Dzameer have spoken earlier, I think the basic principles that we currently face is the fact that they want to keep on moving fast, and there's not enough patience for them to actually aim for their goals. So, in other words, maybe for me, I think as I teach children and also to young adults to be professionals, you know, in dance, I think my challenge is to consistently remind them, and then remind their parents to make sure that they are given proper time to develop their talent, because talent is just the one thing, but I think the discipline of having to make sure they stay within that focus, and of course with the advancements of technology and infrastructure and everything that's around us, they can't stay very long. So they're just like, yeah, very short. So that's my challenge actually, to make sure I continue to develop more creative, focused, and quite diligent practitioners, I think I would say. Yeah.
Right. Suzanne? Well, as a documentary photographer, I think that one of the main challenges, I would say, as a young Malaysian, is to try and engage an audience, an intelligent audience, in world issues, in more global issues than what's happening in Malaysia. I find that a lot of the youth in Malaysia now tend to be very centered on their individual lives. They tend to be very centered on what's only happening locally. So to be able to sort of impart knowledge or share knowledge with the Malaysians, we have to sort of raise the level and raise the bar of engagement with
That's
audience.
very interesting, because according to reports, Malaysian youth are one of the highest, they record one of the highest engagement on social media. They do talk a lot, they do question a lot, but what are they talking about? What is that?
Yeah, absolutely. But I find that the level of engagement is not deep enough. It's very surface level. It's very much, they tend to question a lot, but not know the mechanics of getting to a solution. So they know the problems, they question the problems, but at the same time, it's difficult to see, I don't often see Malaysian youth going beyond that.
It's probably an element of sense of ownership as well, right?
That's right.
Do they take ownership of the challenge, and do they then want to move forward? They sometimes feel this problem, this is an issue, but someone else owns it.
Yes, absolutely.
I think in principle, the way I look at it is that you have this sense of entitlement, and then the ability to voice it out, like what you guys said, social media and all that stuff. But in principle, I think why we never reach that point, or why youths don't reach that point, is because a lot of them don't, or are not willing to, or don't know how to take on responsibility or ownership of the challenge. So like what you said, you have social media, you see that a lot of Malaysian youths are engaging in social media. So they voice all their opinions, their dissatisfaction with various things that go on. But are they willing to take ownership of whatever they are, and of entitlement? And then it boils down to, so if youths are not willing to take ownership of an entitlement, as a government or as any body, do you then give that entitlement to them? As facilitators and as any organization, if you're able to facilitate ownership of all these sort of issues, then I think the sense of organizations, government, giving entitlement to youth will be a lot more forthcoming. And I think it's really a circle that there is entitlement, there is voicing out of your opinion, but you must also take on that challenge. And how are we going to try to facilitate youths to take ownership of their opinions and take ownership of what they put and what they feel they need? And I think that really is where the challenge is.
Do you feel that's lacking, taking ownership of the problem?
I think, at least in the education space, I think that's why Teach to Measure was created, right? Instead of, before this, most of the youth would just go online or in mamak shops. I was a culprit of that myself.
Your idea started in Mamak's shop, though.
Exactly. Yeah, so it needs to start somewhere. It starts on social media, in Mamak shops, but it needs to be translated into action. So now Teach Malaysia exists as a platform for someone, instead of just criticizing, why don't you show if you can make the solution and be part of the solution?
I just want to share with you a solution that I've actually created for this. To provide the kind of empowering system for these guys to take ownership of this solution. So we call it the Student Leadership Symposium, and I've got the pleasure of hosting a lot of leaders, current leaders in Malaysia, people like Zam, for example, who was part of the program. And what we do is basically we get these people who are current leaders who are doing things and probably know a lot of the myths that's involved in their own particular sector, for example, education, economics, and so on and so forth. And then we invite student leaders. And these student leaders locally are not the same as those who are overseas. I mean, if I were to differentiate them, confidence is one. Secondly, the ability to use the resources around them, and so on and so forth. So I think, yes, they want to solve the solution. Yes, they want to take ownership. But this facilitation needs to happen.
Yeah, but I just want to touch on, I think, like Chris commented on the point, like the local and overseas graduates. I think at least from Teach Malaysia's experience in recruiting in both markets, what we've noticed is that the typical student leaders in formal organizations locally don't have that finesse or extra bits. But the students not involved have that, but they're elsewhere, they're spread out. It's a lot more informal, a lot more unstructured. So somehow I don't understand, I don't know why yet, but in local universities, in the structured systems of societies, they don't attract the right talent. But that talent does exist in the local universities.
Okay, I'll like to get into that shortly. Maybe some of our local graduates have a lack of confidence. So what else can we do to empower them with the right tools to help them to reach their full potential? Let's get to the first commercial break. Don't go away, we'll see you right after. Welcome back to the 8th Merdeka Award Roundtable, and I'd like to go on to our next discussion on, let's discuss education, because that's some of the things that we mentioned earlier. Education opportunities, do you think that young Malaysians have access to quality education? Of course, Dzameer, we'll take that question first.
I think on general, yes, we do have a lot of opportunities that are available, the scholarships, even Petronas gives out a lot, Shell, I think ExxonMobil as well. But for Teach Malaysia's purpose, we're always focusing on the bottom 40%. And that's where we feel like equity is not like the fact that everyone needs the same provision of education. Those that need it more, we should give more education services and support in that sense. And it comes down to mindsets, really. The community around it, or the school, or the parents, right? If you're from a low-income community, you tend to have negative mindsets about your potential and opportunities that's available to you. So we just try to open that up a lot more and let them discover their potential.
Suzanne, you work with, I believe, marginalized communities, not only in Malaysia, also particularly in India. In terms of improving access to quality education and improving access basically to basic infrastructures, how do you feel Malaysia is in comparison, and where do you think we can buck up a little?
I think our access to education is actually, I would say, as compared to India, which is where I lived for 6 years. Our access to education, especially for primary and secondary level students, is quite up there. But what I think actually is lacking in our education is not in the formal education system. It's about exposure. You know, I feel that that young Malaysians today are too focused on just academic grades. They need to work more towards being more aware of what's happening around them. They need to work more towards social interactions. They need to be able to sort of build up that communication skills that they need to be able to work in teams, to work together with people to realize larger dreams.
I just want to jump on that as well, because exposure is so important. We have a school in Kuala Selangor, which is about 1.5 hours away from KL, but students there have not even seen the KLCC towers. And we even brought them to visit some of our offices of some of our corporate partners that support Teach Malaysia. And the kids go in there and they see like, wow, the people that work in these corporate offices are normal people. and someday I can be them as well. So it's that exposure equates to a sense of possibility.
I want to echo Suzanne's explanation on education is not just academics, it's actually experience. I feel that the confidence you receive from being academically inclined is really different from the confidence you get when you experience things, like being successful or failing something. And I think that's where we should go into. So what I'm saying, it's not about the
not just
educational
about paper qualification, and
that's
also
right.
about building soft skills, communication skills, because I think that's one of the problems that was raised by employers in Malaysia, that our workforce is, especially our local graduates, not all, are lacking in terms of, like you say, communication skills, critical thinking, strategic thinking, and also competencies in the sense. So maybe
I think that probably
Dr.
boils,
Kamalan.
in my opinion, I mean, coming from a university education point of view, it really boils down to how traditionally we have always taught education as an assessment-driven process, that you study something and then you have an assessment at the end of it. And we have not broken away from that whole mindset that getting a degree is about passing an exam. But in certain situations, we probably need to realize that it's not about passing an exam, but it's about maybe meeting a lot of non-academic qualifications that will allow you to get to exams. And that is probably, it not only requires just the student themselves to change, or even parents to sort of encourage, because you do see now, like, I mean, I have a lot of students that come for admission into medical schools, and you look at their background. They've done easily French, Spanish, Mandarin, they've learned how to play the violin, they've learned how to play the piano, and you look at them and you think that they pretty much can do almost everything and anything. And then you realize that, but why is all this talent just being sort of, packed and kept aside, and then they pursue medicine, So, and then you realize that there is this whole mindset of how everything's about assessment. Not much value is given to a student who maybe can speak 5 or 6 languages, who can play 5 or 6 instruments, and how we can sort of facilitate that sort of talent, because we don't have assessments for those sort of things. We're not recognizing it within the national examination systems. Universities in the country don't recognize it as an entry qualification. So parents can do all those things and promote the kid to do those sort of extra non-academic work. But then at the end of the day, as a parent, you sit and think, now, are the universities, no, but also that are universities going to recognize my child's effort in this area? And
I
if
think
they are
probably
not,
Suhaili could share about that, because you took quite an unconventional career path in Malaysia as a dancer, and now coming back to Malaysia to teach the next generation. Was that a natural decision for you to go? Was there pressure?
Wow, it's a really crazy turning point for me, because I was, like what you're saying, the assessment-driven system, and I liked that. For me, when I was younger, I know, crazy, but I looked at dance as my hobby. But my parents were the other way around. And they took the risk, and I didn't understand that. And I was like, why am I going to Australia at the age of 17? I want to do A-levels. So it's really weird. Like, I liked that system, that routine of, okay, Form 5, I want to do my A-levels, and do my, architecture, accounting, or whatever, the norm, what my parents did, which I'm incredibly grateful for, was set up my video of all my dancing and just send it off to Australia, and I got accepted to actually do basically just about dance and the academics with it, and fulfilled my degree. After, again, the exposure of going overseas and understanding, even in doing my Year 12, which is equivalent to Form 6 here at that time, was very difficult for me, because there was, in the English class, for instance, we had a critical thinking session where they give you articles talking about, their prime minister, and I wasn't clear, like, who's Tony Blair? Who is this? Who's the Pope? There were issues, and they'll actually ask us to speak up what you think about it, whether it's good or bad. The idea is to actually express your opinions.
So I feel that actually, I agree with you, and I also wanted to touch on Dzameer's points about children from the rural areas coming to town and seeing what it's like to be in an office and realizing that there are actual regular human beings like their moms and dads who work in those places. It actually works in the reverse as well. A lot of our children in the urban areas don't know what a real chicken looks like. Let's just put it that way. And you know, in many ways, we generally, as a whole, I feel, should not be like the Malay saying "kata di bawah tempurung," right? We should not be content to our little world over there. We can't just feel like we are kings of our tiny universe. We have to realize that there is a global arena. The world is getting smaller. Internet is helping that. Easy travel is helping that. So we need to be ready for this.
Just relating the first and the second discussion, I think it's clear that there is a need to break societal norms so that people can break away from all these things, so that students can progress differently in a different way and grow and learn non-academic stuff. And then it comes on to our first discussion, how do we facilitate breaking societal norms, and are we doing enough? And I think that's where we are stuck. I don't think we're doing enough to help parents, I mean, like, for example, your parents, what made them make that decision? How can we facilitate more parents and more students to also break that sort of norms? Are we doing, and I think that is where really the challenge comes down to trying to develop is what are we doing to facilitate that sort of break?
We'll get more into that because sorry Dzameer, we have to take this discussion to the next commercial break. But we would like to talk more about education. Like you mentioned, there's a lot of opportunities, and every year we spend the most money on education. Our budget allocation, 56 billion this year. And where is the money going? Is it going to the right places? That is the question. And to facilitate, like Dr. Kamalan said, how do you assist each child to be where they want to be? So we'll talk about that shortly after this break. Stay with us. Hello, welcome back to the 8th Merdeka Award Roundtable discussion. We're talking about how can we elevate the country and how can young Malaysians play an important part in it. And earlier we were talking about education. So every year during our budget announcement, education receives the biggest allocation. And the government has put in extensive investment, I'm sure Dzameer would agree, right up from preschool all the way up to tertiary and even teachers training.
Yep.
Are the money going to the right places?
I don't have access to how budget is allocated, so it's going to be very difficult for me to answer that. But I want to jump on the point that we were talking earlier on about the soft skills and academic points. I think there's a implicit assumption in this group that like it's or, right? But actually, both can happen simultaneously. I went into a geography lesson where they had to teach about elections, and the teacher broke them up into groups. There was those that were voting, there were party members that were representing. They had to speak up in that class, and all of this happened in 40 minutes. So I just want to put it out there that soft skills can be taught within an academic context, and just so that everyone doesn't then just bash academic pieces all the time.
No, actually, I agree with you, but then the question is, the classes that you're talking about now, those are innovative classes. Those are innovative ways of teaching. Is this being implemented in schools that our children go to today?
Not all of it, but Teach Malaysia does go to the government schools, right? So we do teach within the existing system. We don't want to do something outside of the system. But we are working very closely with that. And I think what the ministry is trying to do with the huge budget allocation, especially to the blueprint transformation, that's going to happen for both primary, secondary, and soon tertiary as well, is that you want to change this whole mindset completely. But to change a 420,000 animal or industry or market, or you need a few change makers or agents of change or success points for then people to see, that is what success looks like, exposure again. And then people then can see and they believe that change is possible.
Sure, education, so much money in education, but I think the country is also putting a lot of money in the economic transformation program and so on and so forth. So, but the problem here is that it builds the need for a talent pool that's not the kind of that doesn't require the kind of things that we want to achieve.
You're talking about
Things
skills mismatch.
That's right. Yes, there's a skills mismatch right now, and this is if you cannot even solve this problem, then we are basically sending people to their deathbeds, right? I mean,
Sure.
for example,
We're throwing them in the deep end of the pool.
exactly. As an entrepreneur myself, I see a lot of other people going to the whole startup scene. I think the Gen Ys are all in this whole stage right now, and it's sad to see that while their passion is infectious, but we know at the same time that the pool of money that they're going to reach out to is not enough. And therefore, we'll see a lot of failures, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, but we don't want to see so many failures happening before we can even go to the next stage, of seeing people in the arts being successful, or people in the, any other industry, for example.
I'd like to point out this very interesting report that says that only about some 70% of our workforce have only SPM level education. It means only 20% goes to tertiary.
Yep.
And for the rest, the academic journey ends there. And that also means the level of employment would be much lower. Is that worrying?
Yes, tremendously. I think that stat about that is also anyone currently from the age of 15 all the way to 60 or 65. So it's a current pool in that sense. But if you do look at the blueprint, it also shows a cohort that started in the year 2000 would have finished SPM by the time 2011 or 2012. Out of that, you're right, about 20 or 30% only go off to tertiary education. There's a big push towards vocational training, so there's a bit better skills matching as well. But I really do believe it needs to be given from a talent perspective, right? When it goes into the points like Chris was talking about developing the economy, where does the government or the private sector push funding to happen? It should be demand-driven in that sense.
That's right.
Okay. Maybe Dr. Kamalan, you teach students local and abroad, and what do you think of the quality of our students? And moving on towards the workforce, do you think they are well equipped to take on the challenges out there?
Well, okay, I mean, I teach medical students, so it's very difficult to send medical students out into the workforce without them being able to meet the demand. So we have a regulatory requirement that we have to meet. So, but in principle, I think that it fundamentally again boils down to how we try to meet, how universities' assessment processes, education processes are developed and designed. There is a great gray area as to how much are we going to commit to this non-academic skills. Like I said, it can happen together at all the same time, but how much of emphasis would you give into the sort of areas? And I think a lot of institutions are still struggling to try to come to that ideal sort of ratio or ideal sort of KPIs that they can meet. For example, perhaps ways around it in trying to gauge in terms of how universities perform would not be so much about how many students drop out, but how many students actually do get employed irrespective of whether they are. And that should be the sort of KPIs that institutions to start to strive for. Because then the ministry would realize that with that sort of KPIs in place, then universities must reinvent the way they teach to increase marketability. A lot of institutional rankings, they have the Satara rankings for universities. They don't look at how many of your students actually are employed. They look more at what's your assessment processes. Do they have all these accreditations in place? Are your students coming for 80% of attendance? Do they meet the exam? All those sort of things. So you sort of become insular at the end of the day. And that is a problem. And if you look at it, when you talk about the budget, my opinion is that if you look dollar to dollar value compared to the UK and Malaysia, we're giving huge amounts of money to our universities. Huge. I mean, if you would say that the same amount of allocation is given to UK universities, they wouldn't know what to do with their funds. That's pretty much. But so, is money going to the right place? Yes, it is. But the main question is, are the right places using the money correctly? And that's where I think the problem is, because we're getting a lot of money, but I don't think we're using it correctly or in the right way, channeling it in the right position. And that's where I think the problem is.
Maybe some of the money can go to arts, building arts, culture, heritage.
I believe that from people who have heated discussions about what's the budget for the performing arts, it's always something, probably economics and education and blah, 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 blah. Performing arts. And then, that's that's just the visual image I get of what our budget's allocated. Every year it just gets like cake lapis, you know. It just gets eliminated, and there's a lot of frustration. I know there's a lot of frustration, and that's why I have to be really comfortable sitting in this seat, because it's my responsibility to actually stress out that we sometimes have no budget for 1 year to actually find funding or to pursue something because there's no money, and then the following year would be, here's lots of money, it's time to apply. So it's very, very random. And that's where my income sits as well.
Wherever there is a budget allocated for arts, we need to cultivate intelligent art. That I find is more important in a way, the kind of art we cultivate in Malaysia than the amount of artists getting grants or getting money from the government to develop their art. We need to not just look at the aesthetics of arts, because the aesthetic arts actually speak to the heart. But it's only intelligent art that speaks to your mind. And this is what is going to change minds. People respond to art, whether you're in corporates or whether you're in arts, you respond to art in positive, negative ways, but it helps us to sort of spark dialogue. It helps us to speak of issues. So we need to sort of focus on cultivating much more opinionated artists.
I think it also relates to the appreciation for arts and culture and heritage, and even appreciation for an alternative education, for example, like what Suzanne is doing right now. Which parent in their right mind, when they're young, who would say, like, I want you to grow up to be a person who takes a photo or a filmmaker. But that is slowly changing. There is a huge demand for those kind of skills.
It boils down to the value system. Yes. Like, how much of value would you put on a photographer versus how much of value would you put on let's say, a medical doctor? And I think...
Or put a teacher in
or a teacher as well.
Okay, just throw in teacher Malaysia.
I would think that if, to be entirely honest, they're all equally important. But who gets the ball rolling? What are we doing to change that value system? And I think that's where the government needs to start sort of changing that. We are all important. A doctor is not more important than a photographer, because we each contribute different value to a human, to a person. We contribute differently. Because a lot of times people look at it like, it's, a guitarist. That's not going to put food on the bill or put a roof over the head. But it's not true. It will, and it can, in a lot of instances, do that. We must change the value system that we put onto the sort of profession, onto the sort of careers, ultimately at the end of the day.
I think one day we should just remove the trash collector job, and then we want to see, like, now, are you going to appreciate them or not? I think people need that kind of wake-up call.
Yeah. I think one thing you said, Doc, is like, who is going to change that mindset, right? You said both government, and then you also said we. Yeah. And I think I really want to emphasize the we part. I mean, like, if the government was to go out and say, like, okay, come join, be a teacher, they will struggle because the brand equity is very low at the moment, right? Yes. So that's why Teach Malaysia is just adding this value to the government, and also speaking on behalf of youth, like saying be a teacher and change. And we're not, all our messages are really targeting to the parent, like, so that when they tell their in-laws or their kids, right, my son's or daughter's a teacher, it's like, wow.
I agree, but I think when it comes down again, obviously we'll ask then what would make we change our value system then? Why do we... Okay, fine, you tell me to be a teacher, but why do I need to become a teacher? And let's all face facts. We all want a career. We want to have a decent salary. We want to be able to afford some luxuries in life, some necessities, get a house, and some luxuries. I don't think it's unfair to expect a lot of generation to have some luxuries in their life, okay? So then they sit and think that then I should choose a career that would pay. And then if you tell me to become a guitar player or an artist, that's not going to afford me that luxury, so why should I? And that's where I think the value system must change, because, for example, in a lot of countries, a teacher would get paid a lot more than a doctor, and because the value system has changed, and that is how education changes.
Yeah, but at the same time, I also like to speak about my experience as a photographer. because I'm speaking from that side, sitting next to the doctor. Yeah. But you know, the fact is that the youth today, there's a lot of bloggers. I mean, we've seen a huge rise in alternative career options and career paths. But the problem is that are people willing to pound the pavement? Are people willing to go through the feast of famine that we experience in our line of work? And people need to be sort of prepared for the choices they make in life. They need to be prepared to be able to live within their means. They need to be prepared to work hard to get to the top, because it's a lot more sort of fluid, the way we are able to see who is ranked at which part of our hierarchy of this kind of, you know, alternative career paths.
Okay. All right, guys, sorry. Dzameer, sorry again. I have to stop you. It's always you. But anyway, we have to go for the next commercial break. But I would like to discuss about value system. You mentioned about the appreciation that we should give towards certain careers that are not, probably not that well accepted now, but maybe in the future, because the kids that go to school today, the things that they study might not even be useful, say 20 years from now. So what are we? Sure. Yeah, what are we teaching them? So what are the elements that should be inculcated into our children and our young people today? So we'll talk about that a bit more after the break. Welcome back to the 8th Merdeka Award Roundtable. Joining me are 5 very successful, I would say, young and inspiring individuals. And most of them actually have studied abroad in distinguished universities, but they chose to come back to Malaysia. And I wonder why. Maybe we could start with Suhaili. You were one of the top graduates from your school, dance school, and the art school in Melbourne.
Yes.
Why did you choose to come back?
I felt it was a duty to come back and definitely share my knowledge. And looking at the development of the dance at that point of time, I knew I had to do something, not just teach in ballet schools, but I knew if I needed to have more people to become like me, it has to start with me. As a role example, as best as I can, and I'm still learning, and that's just basically it. We work together to make sure we create things, whether it's educational-wise, whether it's experimental in our works, whether it's even to see people, to encourage them, come for our shows and come and see what we can do, and get them to understand what arts really is.
At this point in time, the country is quite worried about brain drain, our talents going abroad. Right. There's about 1 million Malaysians talents abroad in other countries, serving other countries, and Dzameer. It's very, because you were in the corporate world, both of you were in the corporate world, and you decided not only to come back, but you also decided to venture into something firstly unknown, social entrepreneurship, which is relatively unknown back then, and your non-profit organization as well.
Yeah.
How was it a difficult choice? What went through your mind? What was the consideration?
So I think the coming back or staying there, like when I first joined the corporate world, someone asked me like, why are you back in Malaysia? You should have stayed there, you could have earned a lot more. And I just didn't understand that question. For me, that wasn't how I made that decision. I made the decision based on all the pictures I saw of my family eating together, spending time with grandma, and then all the cousins together. I miss that. That was the thing that I missed the most. But making that jump into the social sector, it wasn't a one-moment decision. It was like small steps and micro decisions that managed the risk all throughout the way. So it was hard work. Like first one, like come up with a business plan. And we were like arguing back and forth, like what to put in that business plan, how to get initial funding, how to work with the ministry. All those steps needed to be said, okay, and then move on. But I do have to thank my training at PwC. All those times they told me like write minutes better, do a better presentation. Indirectly, I learned a lot about communication, project management, issues, risk management, etc. So I'm grateful for my haphazard decision-making process.
Chris?
Well, for me, I take this very personally. When I was in the UK, I saw my fellow Malaysian friends all telling me, you know what, there's no opportunity back home, and you know, it's so bad that even if I come back, I won't get appreciated, and so on and so forth. And I told them, is there anything that you've done by yourself to ensure that this doesn't happen? And they said, it's not my problem, you know. So I took the onus on myself to create a student movement of sorts with some of my friends to use UKEC as a platform. It's a student organization in the UK to fight this brain drain solution, issue. Because if we all want to see a better Malaysia, then it's not a one-person task to do this. It's not a 5% task to do this. It's a whole contingent of really smart people, you know, who all have studied overseas and had the exposure. And locally as well, well, in a sense, exposure, yeah, and for them to come back and commit and do what you can to see the Malaysia that you want to be. Because it's no use asking for all these you know, benefits when you feel that when you don't actually contribute anything. You know, it's like this sense of entitlement that we're talking about. That's right. So what we did is we basically pooled our resources together and started doing things like inviting CEOs, corporate CEOs, NGOs to come over and to share the issues that we face, and I suppose destroy all the myths that they have. You know, like for example, they say in Malaysia you need to have contacts to do any business, but you know, in reality, anywhere you go, you still need contacts. You know, the difference is how you make that contact. You know, do you just sit down and wait for the contact to come to you, or you go out there? So
I think it's great because you guys actually come back and not just become an armchair critic and actually doing something to better the respective industries that you're in. Dr. Kamalan, your consideration to come back to Malaysia and now heading the physiology department.
I decided to come back because I thought, you know, you may think the grass always seems greener in where we are, but maybe it could be greener. When I was there in the UK, for example, over time I did realize that I think that there is also potential for me to grow back home, and maybe that would be an option where I could then spend time also having family and friends. And I came back for that. And I wouldn't lie, I would say that coming back was a good decision. I've been disappointed more than once coming back, and sometimes sit and tell myself, maybe I shouldn't have come back. But then it's how you roll with the punches, and you find opportunities, and you sort of say, you know what, okay, that didn't work out. Let's move on to another thing and do something else. And where I am now, I'm really happy. I think I get to grow more talents. I think I've taken on a position where previously was reserved for expats, and I've taken on that position, and now I get to grow. And so there's a lot of demand in trying to prove that, hang on, a Malaysian can do, I would think, better than what an expat can do in that position. So it was very difficult. So the initial part of it is trying to prove your worth, and therefore it makes you very, you become like, you start joining the rat race and you try to prove. And once you reach that point, I've proven myself, then you start developing people and all stuff. So I've reached that point where I've sort of felt that, you know what, coming back was a good option, and I've been able to develop a few, well, not in a large scale of how Teach for Malaysia would do, but just within my institution, within younger students, I'm able to show them that you can run this place without foreign talent, with good local talents. And I'm homegrown most of my educational life, homegrown totally except until my postgraduate. So I don't see how homegrown people cannot also be successful at the end of the day. So you don't have to go for your undergraduate education abroad. You can do well, and it comes about whether you want to do well or not. I wouldn't deny the fact that I may want to go away and get more exposure and come back, but I think in principle I see that I want to come back here, and I cannot see myself not being away and totally cutting ties to Malaysia, and I think that's the important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I would completely agree with you, because I feel that as a Malaysian, you're always a Malaysian, and that's not just a saying, you know, but it's the fact that that I felt, because I started traveling for work when I was 20, and I went from country to country. I lived in 2 different countries before this, 6 years in India, just before coming back 2 years ago, and I felt that I became more Malaysian when I left Malaysia. And you know, it's not just a matter of missing home, but it was a matter of missing your identity, you know. So I felt that when I went abroad, you know, we get exposed globally. We have a global viewpoint on what happens in Malaysia. We have to bring that back so that we can exchange that learning. We can sort of infect the rest of Malaysians to sort of, understand it from a global perspective.
It's a very good insight, because what we want to achieve ultimately is to not only develop our talents, but also to make them global citizens, to be aware and to actually take charge, leadership roles, not just in Malaysia, maybe abroad as well. We'll talk about that shortly after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back. We are on to the last segment of the 8th Merdeka Award Roundtable, and I'd like to go to my young panelists and ask them this. What worries you as a young person living in Malaysia? What do you think might compromise your future, and what are your hopes?
Me first again, okay?
Bring it this way.
I think what worries me, there's a lot that we spoke about. I think what opportunities that we have is something that we've been talking all along. Change the world. Malaysians can do a better job. I really think Malaysians can take over the world, literally. But I think we always have to remember what Gandhi and Michael Jackson said. Start with the man in the mirror and be the change you want to see.
Chris.
Oh, that's short. Okay. Well, the actual challenge that we all need to overcome is an individual one. I mean, first of all, we have to know that when we embark something, how committed are we in this, and have we done enough work to gather enough support, and not just go to things blindly. At a certain sense, yes, going blindly is great because you don't get too much fear before you even begin. But when you do decide to go in with a winning plan. And as what Dzameer said, we have all it takes, because can you imagine we are a mesh of people with different culture, different religion, different different background, and we can not even survive, we can thrive in this opportunity. And we are also known as the center of ASEAN. Not really the center of ASEAN, but that our pool of people can go anywhere and still do well. So knowing all this,
Malaysia truly Asia.
Malaysia truly Asia, right? Wow, nice. Okay, got cough got there. But yeah, so with all these reasonings known to us, there's no reason why we can't go ahead. We can't be a global citizen, let alone an ASEAN citizen, and do so much more for not just ourselves but for other people around us. So what I hope to see the youth to do is to take charge, right? Take charge of their own future. And whatever they commit to it, and because there are so many people around now to help them, unlike maybe many years ago.
Do you think we're creating enough opportunities for leadership?
The alumni movement would really be that force of talent or leadership talent that's then required to change the system from inside and outside of education. So everyone talks about that. What are we going to do to change education? Actually, our primary goal is to change society and the values.
Exactly. And that's for TFM. I guess even on myself, I have my my initiative called I Project. And what we do, we'll basically get the our young leaders who want to do something and connect them with the current ones. And we hope to see a transition. And I guess we would like to see a younger generation of leaders that will contribute not only in terms of movement but also on policy level to support the rest of the people below them.
Coming back to, you mentioned diversity.
Mm-hmm.
It is our strength. We have so many different cultures, dances, arts, and heritage, but have we been able to retain that, and have we been able to use it for the betterment of Malaysia?
Questions for you.
Yeah, you're the only arts person, so it's for you.
It's always been a battle for us. A battle to always say, hey guys, corporate level, and also just to tap into schools. I think what my aim obviously is to not just work on the stuff that's accessible, but I think to start really working with hopefully the government and maybe organizations that I personally just found out, to actually work how movement therapy or the arts could actually be started from at a young age. And that's when we need to encourage parents, as you said, to change their mindset and to actually be the witness, to see the development of their children through programs that are incorporated in the performing arts and culture. And, you know, because I want to see, as you say, communication skills is a problem for people who are just starting out work. And I think it, again, starts from how you can communicate with your body, your posture, your confidence. It all starts with many ways of not just verbally, but through ways in the arts, I believe.
I would like to just add on this one. You know, I heard somewhere that arts is actually a reflect of the development of the country. You know, because if a country is fully developed, then they should be able to appreciate art. Because the inverse is true. When a country is in trouble, the first to go is arts as well. So if we are going to get into a highly developed nation by 2020, then we should all focus on improving the standards of our arts as well, or the usage and appreciation of arts.
Okay. All right, Dr. Kamalan, I'll go with you first.
Yeah, I think I have just a few things. One, I think, is what I would like to see Malaysia do is the liberalisation of education in this country, and I think with particular emphasis, of course, being selfish here, on tertiary education, universities. And I think you can have structured education maybe in your primary and high school, but I think once you come to the university, it has to be liberal. It has to be where there is no interference, where talents are allowed to grow, people are allowed to make judgments, and I think that's what I really want to see. And I think that there has to be this also more effort in trying to retain and recruit outstanding Malaysians. And I think that at this point in time, we have organizations like Talent Corp and all stuff. But to be entirely honest, I don't think that that's enough. And I don't think they're doing enough to retain.
What else more needs to be done to get Malaysians back?
I think you must understand that Malaysians abroad are there because they're being recognized for their value.
Absolutely.
And I don't think just having tax reductions and, you know, getting a car is any recognition for their value or for their own personal development. I think that's not good enough if you really want to bring back highly valued individuals into the country. And I think that...
If I can jump in very quickly, so I think that value or that recognition probably comes from autonomy in the job or in the role, right?
That's why. So that's why you have the liberalisation of education. From education sector point of view, you send numerous people go out and do PhDs. Some of them don't come back because they get that recognition. They come back to a university here and then their wings are clipped. You follow this, you don't do this, you abide by this, you cannot do. So everyone realizes that, yeah, I may have a good tax rate and a nice car I'm buying at a cheaper price, but then it doesn't give recognition for me as an individual for my talent, which comes down to why we should then start looking more internally into our talents and not being dependent onto expat talents. Like, I think we are still, I mean, we're hitting a developed nation, and this whole policy of an expat salary and a local salary and all that double standard is, for me, being part of that system, I find it extremely degrading for talent, and I think and frustrating. And I think we have to get rid of all those sort of things and look internally and reward people for their talent, not reward them because of their passports, because of any of their different background. Meritocracy in rewards. That's what I think is important.
All right. Suzanne.
Our generation and the generation after us, the generation X and Y, have one of the problems that we face is about being hardworking. We need to be able to sort of work towards our goals. We need to understand that there is hard work involved in reaching your goals. So it's a friend of mine once said, like he's a photographer, a very well-known photographer based in Japan, and he said it's easy to start projects, but it's difficult to finish them. So the fact is that you can't keep starting projects. You know, we don't have a problem of initiation anymore. So many young Malaysians are initiating projects. They're starting startups. They're doing their own businesses. They're entrepreneurs. But the problem is whether or not they're willing to do the hard work to see it till the end.
With that, we have come to the end of the program. It's been a pleasure to have all of you guys here, and it's great to know that each of you are doing something to contribute back to the nation, and I believe this is where we want our young people to move forward to, not just to have success on their own, but also to put it back and to contribute. And thank you so much again to Dzameer, Chris, Suhaili, Dr. Kamalan, and Suzanne for coming on this show. And that's all for the time we have for the 8th Merdeka Award Roundtable. And we'll see you again in the next episode. I'm Cynthia. Goodbye.
This program was brought to you by the Merdeka Award, an initiative to promote excellence by ExxonMobil, Petronas, and Shell.